Okay, so I'm going to start the lecture. I want to go to the video. All right, good morning. Last time the boys were here, the girls were here. So every time it's a different arrangement. الأسبوع الماضي, like the other group. Depends on the mood. Depends on the mood. Okay. All right. So can you hear me at the very back? Okay. Because the microphone, I don't know if it's going to be working or not. So, sure. Can I use it? Last time the battery ran out. I try. I don't. All right. Let's get started. I think I have to hold it. Yeah. Okay. It's not working. Okay, so I don't know. I think some of you saw me on screen last week. So. Okay. So you know who I am. Okay, good. So today we're going to talk about infant social development. Okay. So what is social development? What does it entail? What is what do you need to have like social development? So communication. Before communication. So like environment, so visual, okay. So you need to kind of see where you are, like kind of understand your environment, and then you start to communicate. What about like sort of things related to interpersonal, like eye contact, body gestures? Are these necessary in like social communication? Yeah. How are they necessary and why are they necessary? Okay. How is it better understanding? So like when you are approaching somebody, just by looking at their face and their like body language, you can figure out how you're going to manage a particular, situation. So yesterday I'm in the clinic and we had a very aggressive 15-year-old girl. She has intellectual disability, okay, which means that her like cognitive abilities are below the batteries that. Okay. So her cognitive abilities are below average. So I come out because I hear her screaming in the hallway. Okay, so she's the next one in line to be seen. I hear screaming out in the hallway. So I go out and so I assess. So as I'm walking towards her, I can see her yelling and screaming, and she's using her hands. She's slapping herself, slapping her mother. So if you see something like that, what should you do? Should you like go ahead and bring them into the office, or does that kind of signal something to you just by an observation? So it kind of signaled to me that there's a bit of danger, right? So you get a sense and know. It's from outside. From where? Another class? Oh, okay. Oh, it should be mute. Anyway, so it gives you a sense that there's something going on that's quite wrong, okay? Especially that she's using a lot of her hand gestures and she's slapping. And the fact that she's actually slapping her own mother is a huge indicator that obviously she could slap me, right? Like if she's doing that, then she could be slapping anyone. So just like you observe a situation, you think about, okay, how are you going to interact just based on the facial features? She looked really distressed. She was crying and she was quite aggressive. So I did not bring her into the office. I spoke with the mother in the hallway and we walked towards the elevator because there was absolutely no point in bringing her in. Okay. So we use our senses to kind of figure out what's going on in our environment and we assess danger. So is this online? Okay, how do we manage this? How do we manage this? Does anyone know? Should be locked. Okay. All right. So we look at how people process faces. There is a sound, Dr. I don't know what that sound is. I think it's this one. This one? Yeah. When it was up. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the processing of faces is the beginning of any kind of social interaction. Would you agree or not? Okay. So that's kind of like when you start to like interact, the first thing that you look at is what's in a person's face. Yeah, so the eyes, okay, because that's the thing that you like kind of attracts you the most, not because it's attractive or not, that's what catches your attention. So if you're talking to somebody and they're not looking at you in the eye, like they're looking everywhere, what is that? How does that make you feel? So you get a sense that there's no interest, but also what, like some people are anxious, right? So some people have an issue like maintaining eye contact because they're anxious people. So it can tell you a lot about a person in terms of like, are they maintaining eye contact? Are they engaged in whatever sort of interaction? So the eyes is an essential part of any kind of social interaction, okay? So do they like faces? Do infants like faces, you think? Yeah? Okay, so we'll go with that. Okay, but why do you think they like faces? And whose face are they going to like the most? So the mother or the primary person. So it could be the mother, it could be whoever, right? We kind of by default say the mother because that's by default the first person that a child interacts with. But it could be any primary caregiver that is the persistent or consistent person providing care. And that becomes sort of their first experience of the world. Okay, so it could be a great experience, or it could not be a great experience, depending on sometimes even the mental health of the primary caregiver. So we see mothers who have postpartum depression. So what do you think about the sort of facial interaction between the infant and a mom with postpartum depression? Is there going to be much? So there's very minimal, and this baby doesn't understand that this mom is going through depression. All they are perceiving is that this lack of interest, there's lack of connection, lack of bonding. Okay, so a lot of theorists will tell you that the prototype or the beginning of a healthy kind of development is that contact, the first contact that you have with your primary caregiver. Okay, so we're going to show you a video. Let's see.
Psychologists used to believe that the baby human's mind was one great, blooming, buzzing confusion. But the baby human comes into the world already equipped with the capacity to think, reason, to learn about the world and about itself. At the moment, 2-week-old Heather lives only in the immediate world of the senses. Like all newborns, she responds to a series of stimuli, but they have no meaning for her. A play of light and dark from the window captures her interest. Her eyesight is not developed yet, so this is what she sees. The patches on the wall seem to come alive and beckon her. At this young age, Heather has already embarked on the huge task of making sense of her surroundings. Now her eyes turn to the bars of her crib. They look like thick stripes, just the right size for her eyes to discern. But what the baby human responds to most of all is the human face.
Hello. Good morning.
Heather is gazing at the most important face she's encountered so far. At 12 inches, what she sees are mainly contrasts of light and dark where the features are. But her clearest view is from 6 inches away, an easy distance to communicate love between mother and child. It seems nature has prepared the baby human from birth to pay attention to the face, as if saying, look carefully. Something that looks like this is going to be very important for your survival.
Hi there. Okay, are you all set?
At Daphne Morer's lab, Terry Lewis is part of a group studying the phenomenon of this attraction and how it develops in the first 3 months of life.
Are you ready?
10-day-old Dylan is shown a card with 2 images on it. The right side has 3 blobs representing the rudimentary configuration of the human face. The left has the blobs inverted.
Good looking. Very good.
Dylan is drawn to the image that resembles the human face. But what is it that he's attracted to?
Careful, I might trick you.
To find out, they show Dylan another card.
Okay, are you all set?
One side has the blurry image of a face, and the other side was created to represent only the light and dark contrasts of a face. Dylan prefers to look at the side with the contrasts of a face, which indicates that it's not the features themselves that the baby human reads at this age, but the areas of contrast created by those features. So what 2-week-old Heather is really fascinated with is the contrast between light and shadow created by her mother's eyes, mouth, and hairline. But she doesn't know yet what they mean. Back at the lab, 6-week-old Devon is shown the same card.
How about these guys now?
Unlike Dylan, he turns to the image that looks more like a face. The other image no longer interests him. So what happened in those 4 short weeks that separate Heather and Devon? Researchers believe that this is when the baby human's higher brain centers, which are sensitive to visual stimuli, take over. And that is what's directing Devon's gaze and begins to give meaning to what he sees. At the same time, other regions of the higher brain centers are preparing the baby human to think and reason. These exceptional capacities are what set humans apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. Gavin is 8 weeks. As he begins to interact with his environment, the world around him takes on new meaning. He looks at his mother with new eyes. During these critical early weeks, new neural pathways in the brain are forged. The more things the baby human sees, the more this ability surges. At 2 months of age, this is what Gavin's world looks like to him. His life thus far has been a kaleidoscope of sights, sounds, sensations, and smells. But he's now beginning to make connections between them.
Let's get this all changed for you. There we go.
He suddenly realizes a remarkable thing,
He's a happy boy then. There you go. Oh,
that the sound of the voice and the moving lips of his mother are related.
good boy.
For the first time, he can put together sight and sound. Out of the chaotic flow of impressions, he slowly realizes that the world isn't one thing. He now begins to distinguish the amazing world of objects.
All right, so you can see a difference just, over weeks from what.
It's a question people have asked for as long as there have been people. Are human beings
All right, so you saw the difference just over a few weeks, how, the visual interests have changed, okay? So obviously there's an interest in pattern, okay? And the face is a very dynamic, let's say, structure, okay? There's a lot of movement, there's a lot happening in the face, so it really is very attractive, okay? We call the contrast top heavy, and the reason is that the eyes are sort of like the top part of the face, and there's a lot going on with the eyebrows, the eyes, the eyelashes, and then lower down you have your nose and lips, so it's sort of heavier up and less so down, okay? Again, there's this kind of like a, let's say, disagreement. What actually causes this sort of preferential orientation to face-like stimuli, okay? So again, it's about movement, all right? Contrast. So these are things that start to kind of, let's say, catch the eye of the infant. So how they process faces actually also differs over time. So initially, there could be a preference that appears and disappears. Again, keep in mind, in the first 2 months of life, there isn't much of visual acuity. So everything's as much of a blur. So that's why, again, preferences change. 1 month old, they can scan faces, but they kind of look more at the external features more than internal features. Whereas 2 months old will start to look more at internal features. And again, with more cortical specialization, you start to have better differentiation. Like we said, it's a social stimulus, okay? It's not blank. But I mean, if you were to show an infant sort of 2 pictures, one of a moving face and one of a very still face, where do you think their interest would be? The moving, because it's more interesting, it's more appealing, okay? They also respond to more upright versus inverted. So remember when she showed him the blob of like the 2 and then 1, so that is more appealing than the one that's upside down. And again, it's because that's what they're familiar. So what's really important in terms of learning is that we familiarize ourselves with a prototype. Then once we have that sort of ingrained in our brains, we then move on to look at things that are different, okay? So you will always notice similarity, and you need to understand similarity before you start to notice difference. So for example, in our culture, Middle Easterns, we have very sort of, let's say, similar features that are very different from Asian, very different from African. So usually, again, infants born into a particular culture recognize that culture first, then they will notice what is different. So I remember when my daughter was 2 years old, we're traveling in Riyadh airport. So she's not used to super blonde people, that's not part of our culture. So she was 2 years and a bit, and then there was like a super blonde woman standing behind me, and my daughter was just fixated because it was new to her. Like, I've seen darker skin, darker hair. What is this super light color? So it was something completely new to her. And you'll notice sometimes even in elevators, kids with their moms, and they suddenly start to stare. I don't know if you've ever noticed that with your siblings or cousins, and it's really embarrassing for moms when kids start to focus and stare, but usually it's because something caught their eye that they're not used to, that they don't understand, that they want to know more about. And it's not about like being rude. So moms will say, it's rude to stare, but it's really out of trying to form or understand like the difference between what they see and what they already know. Okay. So the facial prototype or the blueprint becomes your reference. Then you kind of compare to that. Okay. Now, if you're born in a very multicultural environment where you have everything and everyone, okay, so what becomes your prototype? How do you develop a prototype in a very multicultural environment? How do you think? Yeah, so your prototype is your family, the people that you live with, that becomes your prototype. Okay, so they do prefer to look at, let's say, mom sort of look-alike or mom figure. If the primary caretaker is the father or whoever, so that becomes a mom. Okay, so the person that they're mostly in contact with. They talk about operant conditioning, which is something we'll talk about in another lecture. But what it means is how do you know that an infant recognizes or doesn't recognize? Okay, so it's about like being excited. So they noticed that when they showed an infant pictures of their mom, they got more excited, and so they're like sucking more onto their pacifier. So that was more like an indication of recognition, So maintaining eye contact, like you saw in the video, so the eyes will go to something that is interesting or appealing. Okay, and then we look at again infants of depressed moms where there's really not much going on in terms of the interaction. Does that mean they don't bond to these moms? Do you think? Do you think they won't bond to the moms?
Maybe they will, but that's beyond how they want.
Again, that will be their prototype. They wouldn't know otherwise. So that depressed mom is the mom, okay? They have nothing to compare to. So they don't know that moms are supposed to be reactive, interactive. So they will bond to that, and that becomes a prototype, okay? So if you have kids who live with, some parents are very, low key, not very emotionally expressive, okay? It's also cultural. So that becomes your prototype. So when you start to kind of see other people, again, Middle Eastern being louder and we use our hands, so that is unusual for some, okay? Versus like if you go like more north up in the world, like Norway, Sweden, where people maybe a bit more reserved than Italians, Egyptians, it's completely different. And again, how parents sort of react or interact. So part of my training I did was with infant psychiatry. So infant psychiatry is from 0 till 5, okay? And one of the things that they really worked on was bonding. So if you have a mom with mental health issues, depression, schizophrenia, and she is pregnant, and she may have, or she has a personality problem. So she may have had like bonding or attachment issues of her own growing up. So partly you start to kind of almost teach these moms how to bond because it may not sort of be a natural thing to them. I remember I had a mom of triplets. So we were seeing this triplets because we have a high risk program at King Fahd Medical City where we see, infants of high risk pregnancies at not 0, 6 months, 12, 18, and 36, just to like monitor their progress. So this mom of triplets, they were like, I think almost 2 years old. So one of the issues that made her come to our clinic was, she's like, I don't know how to hug my kids. I don't know how to like be affectionate with them. When they want to like hug, again, 2-year-olds, all they want to do is like hug you and be on top of you. It really irritates her. She's like, I feel I want to like get out of my skin. She wants to push them away. So she was really sad because that's really not fair to them, but she didn't know otherwise. And so one of her issues again is her own parenting. So growing up with her own mom who had schizophrenia. So she doesn't know what it was like. She didn't have that experience. Like her mom wasn't like and her mom would generally push her away when she was not well, and she never really understood what was going on. But again, so she kind of grew up having issues with bonding and attachment, and now she has these triplets who are like all over her. So it's not just one, but three, and that's really like an overload of affection and feeling, and then that she has to reciprocate, and she was not able to. So that was what we were working on with this mom, as to how to be able to tolerate even skin to skin. Like she couldn't really tolerate them touching. And again, 2-year-olds, you can't really tell them, don't touch mommy, don't kiss mommy. Like it's not something they can even, understand. All right, so the recognition of mom's face really depends on seeing both. So her internal features would be the eyes, nose, and mouth. External features would be more like hairline and ears. So 2 months old may recognize more internal features only. So like they have to see her eyes, they have to see her face. 4 months old can recognize her by her external features. So they've already known what her internal features look like. Now they can actually recognize her external features. And then a very important milestone, which is the age 2. You're going to hear age 2 in different parts of development. So by age 2, okay, they've already developed and have a very set prototype. So now they're interested in new. So they want like sort of novel things, new things, okay? So it takes about 2 years for kids to establish that prototype for expression, for culture. And then by 2, things are kind of set, and then you start to look at the world, okay? And that's kind of around the time when kids can start to head out to daycare, okay? Because they've already kind of got a good sense of, life or world, if you will, a sense of security, and we'll talk about attachment in a bit. And then from the age of 2 is when they can sort of start to let go and start to kind of head out of the house, start to form friendships, different relationships, and then, with the whole school environment. So they say the recognition of father's face develops later. Now, I think probably with the generational change that we're seeing, I'm seeing a lot more dads really involved in childcare more than we used to see before. I don't know if you would agree. Are you seeing more dads involved? Yeah, I think it's like it's a nice partnership versus that stereotype of where, dad doesn't do pampers, dad doesn't do feeding, dad is like the reference for whenever an issue happens. So we're seeing a lot more shared parenting. So, again, we could question this, okay? They say it's qualitatively different. And again, it's maybe because, and again, it could be a stereotype. So what is it that moms offer that dads can't? Or is there anything that moms offer that dads can't? Other than that, because you can use a bottle. So the concept of feeding in itself is about not necessarily the breastfeeding, but about like the whole experience, okay? Because some moms don't breastfeed at all because they can't, or for whatever reason. So it's the experience. So what about breastfeeding makes it an experience? So there's skin to skin, there's eye contact. So like you saw in the video, like the mom, the way she's looking at her baby, it's like he's the apple of her eye. Do you know what that means? The apple of the eye is like, and the whole world is this baby. There's nothing else exists. So it's really important for babies to see that look of like, you are the most important thing in my life, okay? Now, we also are seeing with the generational, change, I've seen a lot of moms breastfeeding while they're on their phone, while they're on other things. So we're losing that eye contact, that kind of, let's say that environment where this baby is completely encompassed in love and affection. So again, moms are working. It's a very busy and fast life versus, your grandparents where your grandmother is at home. I'm not even sure if your moms are at home. Probably your moms are between, working moms and stay at home, but for sure your grandmas were stay at home, I think. Does anyone have a grandma who was like a working? Okay, so that's nice, but again, it's a very fast pace. and for moms to have to kind of juggle around like house, kids. So it is, so we do give that advice. If, you know, when you are in that process, try to just, you know, focus on it, because there's so much that your baby is gaining by just you being there. Your presence adds so much to the quality of their life later on. Like the significance is beyond your ability to even, because there's so much power in that bonding. Okay. So as they get older, obviously they need less time to process, because initially they're going to really look at detail and try to like really process it. But, you know, as you are when you are learning something new, it takes you a bit longer. But once you get it, it just becomes a quicker, because you've got you kind of picked up the learning pace. Okay. Their ability again increases by age 1 to recognize from different angles. Okay. So if mom has her like glasses on, sunglasses on, so he can't really see her face, but he can see her hair, you know, so you start to be able to figure out things based on other sort of features, not necessarily just the eyes. What's also interesting is if you are engaged in an activity, babies tend to look at what you're doing more than look at you, okay, because it's a movement, right? So they'll be more interested at your hands moving, if you're making like sort of gestures with your mouth, so that really interests them. So movement. What about recognition of other faces? So they talk about the configuration more than the features of the face. So what is a configuration? What does that mean? So the architecture, if you will, like the الهندسة, the architecture of the face. So how wide are the eyes apart from each other? More so than are they pretty eyes or not? The nose, again, the nasal bridge. So the architecture of the face is something that could be more appealing. Okay. And again, you have more use of the right hemisphere aiding you in facial recognition. Females again tend to develop that sense quicker, and obviously you figure out faces of your own sort of culture, of your own race, because that becomes your prototype. What about their own face? Okay, have you ever seen kids look at themselves in the mirror? Tell me, what do you think about that? They can lose track of time, right? Like they're right there in front of the mirror and they're just amazed. Okay, and part of it is trying to understand, you know, is that me or is that not me, or who is that? Okay, so it does take them time to figure out that image is actually them. Okay, it's not like a 3-month-old, or let's not say 3, let's say a 6 or 8-month-old looking at their image is not going to really figure out yet that is them. Okay. 4 to 5 months, they can discriminate between moving images of themselves and others. So it starts. At 8 months, they start to look at longer at images of others. But the recognition of self in mirror, okay, that is me, is a more of an advanced feature. And so that's between 18 to 24. So 1.5 years to 2 years is when that becomes something that they really understand.
Who's that in the mirror?
This is known as a mirror self-recognition test, which may offer clues about the development of self-awareness. Without alerting the child, a mark is placed on its forehead.
Who's the baby? Who's the baby?
Usually, a baby younger than about 18 months doesn't make the connection between itself and the person in the mirror. The child may even look behind the mirror for the stranger it sees.
Hi. Hi. Dad.
But by about 18 months, there's a change in the child's awareness. Now it notices the red dot and the link between itself and the image in the mirror.
It's not red anymore.
What's not red?
My this. My head.
Over the next few years, children go on to fulfill their human birthright, constructing an increasingly sophisticated sense of self. They will have a rich and complex life of the mind, and a sense of being the central characters in their own dramas.
Okay, so that was clear, right? So from 18 to 24 months, and again, remember these milestones, because you're going to get a lot of that, right? That's when they start to realize that that is who they are, okay? So what about different types of faces? So you realize that started off with mother's facial recognition of mom, maybe other members, including themselves. Then it's the world, right? Their siblings, grandparents, uncles, aunts, okay? So the sex of the primary caregiver is interestingly important, okay? So they actually respond if faces are attractive. Does that make sense? Have you ever seen kids look at someone just because they are nice looking? Have you ever seen that? So you'll hear like moms say, oh, my son loves his like nursery teacher because she is so beautiful. When my daughter was in nursery, so I think the teacher used to put lashes. So she would come in all day long and talk about the lashes, of how beautiful she thought these lashes, like she's like, they're so long. So the whole day it's all about the lashes of her teacher. So attractiveness is something, I mean, we as adults, we are attracted to attractive things, whether it's people or places or clothes. So that is something that is appealing. Okay, so attractive is appealing. But what makes a face more attractive than another? What do you think? So symmetry, right? So even if some people think that large eyes are an attractive thing, right? But the fact that it's not symmetrical may not be appealing, because it could be for some kids kind of scary, like these googly eyes, like people with really big eyes. So symmetry is essential in terms of determining level of attractiveness, but it's very relative. Like what is attractive to you is not attractive to somebody else. So we develop our preferences as we go along, okay? So 12 months of age, they will look longer and interact more with something that is attractive, more than unattractive, okay? And again, it's about symmetry. So if someone has a very wide nasal bridge, or if it's a very wide nose, because it's not symmetrical with the rest of the face, so it may not be very attractive, okay? Also skin color, depending on, what they're used to or whatnot. So they will use internal features as a basis for preference, so your eyes, nose, and mouth, okay? The average population becomes your prototype. So averagely, Middle Eastern have an average like prototype, again, European, so you understand that, okay? You're able to form, like infants are able to form prototypes by age 6 months. So age 6 is also an important milestone. And then we said preference is based on symmetry. By 6 months, they can actually differentiate faces based on how attractive or not they are. And then by the end of the first year, they would attribute negative things to unattractive faces, okay? So they start to develop that sense, and that is not an attractive face, so therefore it may have a negative attribute. So maybe, they will attribute not being a nice person, or kind of being afraid of a particular person just based on the fact that they're not symmetrical. Again, do kids go on in life becoming, based on image, and so again, that parental input is really important. So sometimes kids will complain, I don't like this person because of whatever, and so moms and dads should say what? If your child tells you that person's really ugly, I don't like them, as a good mom or dad, what are you supposed to do? What do we do when your kids say things that are not nice about other people? Yeah, you teach them, right? Because you teach them that image is not everything, okay? This is how God created them. So it's not this person's fault that their nose is like that or that their eyes are like whatever. So that's how the input. So they have they're developing the prototype, but then there's input, which is parenting, about how to understand these things. Okay, how do you value people? Do I value people because of how they look or what they wear, or do I value people based on who they are and how they behave, right? So that's where parenting comes in. Okay, so when we see kids who are mean to other kids or who make out all these negative comments, you start to then wonder, like, where are their parents? And even when you see kids who make a mess of a place and they don't like clean up, you also wonder about where's the parents, you know? On an airplane, I'm sure you've all had that experience where next to you a bunch of kids that are screaming and yelling and mom is like, I don't know, on her phone or something, right? Do you ever wonder, like, why doesn't she just do something? You may not be able to stop 2-year-olds from wanting to climb on chairs, but you at least want to see an attempt from a mom to say, please stop, or, you know, you would appreciate it a lot more if you see an effort being made to kind of control a situation versus, and no, they can just do whatever they want to do, okay? Because you would actually be angry just seeing that there's no effort. You would want to actually go there and, you know, do something about it, okay? So now we've finished understanding faces in terms of features, but what about expressions? Do you think they can understand facial expressions? Okay, eventually, yes, okay. What are expressions that are common when we are interacting? Like, what are common? So smiling, because that means happiness, right? Frowning. Okay, so frowning. So those are like very basic. So kids can tell that person is happy or sad just based on, you know, what are their eyebrows doing and what is their mouth doing. So they can also read based on your facial expression what your emotion could be. Okay, so this is actually very complex because kids with autism, I don't know if you've ever seen autistic children. Have you ever? So they can't read that. So they can see an eyes, nose, and a mouth, but they cannot read what the expression means. Okay, so it's sort of graded between understanding features and then understanding the emotion behind a feature. Okay, subhanAllah, it's so complicated, yet so simple. Okay, where we notice the sort of, not when we see autistic children, and they cannot read any cues whatsoever. Okay. So they say that 1 to 2 day olds can imitate some facial expressions, which again, you know, they can barely see. But, you know, with a newborn, and I'm sure you've all seen it, everybody's in that baby's face, right? Mom, dad, grandparents, everybody's right in there. So this baby is like flooded, overloaded with a lot of emotions, usually happy ones, right? So that's kind of one of the first things that babies are exposed to. It's just smiley, even sounds that are like happy. So that becomes a prototype, okay? Because that's the norm. So when kids are not exposed to that, then you start to like worry because they should be, okay? By 3 months, you can actually show a child a picture of mom and stranger, and they can pick out mom. Like we said, more excitement, more focus, because they can pick up mom. They can discriminate an emotional environment, as well as becoming more familiar with facial expressions and what they mean. So very important, discrimination does not mean understanding. So they can tell that this is a smiley face, but they don't know what that means yet, okay? So it's a smiley face, it's a sad, like they can see like a mouth like that or a mouth like that, but what does that mean, okay? So that's a really important like point. So then they start to categorize. So then you see facial features, you still don't really understand them, but then you start to categorize. What is categorization? What does that mean? So grouping, and why is that important? Why is grouping important?
So they could like differentiate between different kinds of like facial expressions.
Yeah.
Afterwards and afterwards.
So we categorize all the time, and it's how we learn, right? So when you're studying for whatever exam, you make tables, you put things in groups. That's how we can learn better, okay? So they will categorize expressions into like boxes. So between 4 and 7 months, they start to do that. So similar facial expressions can mean the same emotion. So when you are happy and you are smiling, that depicts a particular state of being, okay? It's very unusual for you to be yelling and screaming and then smiling at the same time. Is that correct to say? Because that would be odd, because it doesn't match, okay? So we do see that with mental health problems, and as you'll see when you do psychiatry, so sometimes people are talking about really sad things, but they're laughing, okay? And so that you have a mismatch between what you see, the affect and the content, okay? And so you would see that with people who are like bipolar or manic, if you will, all right? So that mismatch indicates an abnormality, because usually it should match. When you are happy, you look happy and you talk about happy things. When you're sad, you look sad and you talk about sad things, okay? So we categorize happy before fearful. And why is that? Because that should be your normal environment. So if children are more familiar with fearful, like infants are more familiar with fearful, what does that tell you about their environment? So maybe this is, where's that coming from? Can you send them a message to? All right. So yeah. So if fearful is what they're used to, that means you wonder about the environment. You know, is there abuse going on in that environment? Is it a volatile environment? So again, when we do assessments of kids, so it probably takes about maybe between an hour and a half to 2 hours to do an assessment of a child and family. And the reason being, it's not only the kid. Okay, it's so much more. So last week I was telling you guys about the 6-year-old, the other group. So the 6-year-old girl who presented with depression. Okay. And so I saw her parents a few days ago, and the story is now completely different. So this girl, since the age of 4, there's been a lot of, let's say, stress around eating. So she doesn't feel hungry in the morning, and so she doesn't really want to eat. And then they started to get into this like, and again, moms will do that out of feeling like, you know, my child has to eat in the morning. So it's out of good intention. How could you not eat in the morning? So the mom was telling me that the grandparents of this child, when she was younger, they'd wake her up like at Fajr and they would feed her milk with eggs, you know, because she wasn't eating. So they were like force feeding her. This girl has an older brother who was born with a single ventricle, and so has had multiple surgeries. So also eating and feeding was essential for him just because he was just generally weak. So there's a lot of issues around eating and feeding, but it was getting to the point of almost being emotionally abusive. Okay. So when this girl, like they were going on the weekend to friends for breakfast, the day before she started to stress out and she was tearful because they're going to ask her to eat. Okay. So what I'm saying is it's really important to take a really good history, and things are not always what they seem. Okay. Especially with kids, environment plays a huge role, and how they perceive environment. So mom has decided that she's not going to force her daughter to eat. Okay. But what does she do instead? So the girl is playing. Okay. They're eating, and mom will kind of look over and have this look of sadness. Okay. And then this girl is super sensitive because she's super anxious. And so this girl will drag herself and sit at the table, although she does not want to eat. Right. So again, mom didn't say anything, but it's very emotionally charged. Okay. So these are things that are important when you work with kids, because they really pick up on what you don't say, sometimes more than what you actually say. So how you look at them, your body language when you say what you say. And it's very important, we tell parents, is when you are upset, okay, again, it's for these prototypes. When you are upset, you cannot like yell at your child and then hug them after. So some parents will like slap, like spank, feel guilty, and then they'll like hug their child. What do you think about that? It's very confusing, because are you mad at me, or do you love me, or do you not love me? So like these mixed kind of messages just based on parents' behavior is so confusing for kids, because then they start to associate love with violence. Like, if you love me, you hit me, or if you love me, you know what I mean? So it's really important when you're with children is to be very clear. Okay. Now, having said that, life is not easy. Life is not simple. It's not as simple if you have somebody with, whether parents are struggling financially, emotionally, whatever, it's going to spill over into the environment. Okay. So the objective is to identify these things and just help people figure out what's better way to do stuff. Okay. So facial expressions need to be prototypical for kids below 10. So it's really important, when you're smiling, you're smiling. Okay, because you're happy. When you're angry, you're frowning. You cannot frown and then sound like you're happy, because that really confuses kids. Okay, you're kind of giving them these mixed messages, so they don't know what is happy, what is not. So under 8 months, they can rely on the features to categorize expression. So like if it's a frown, that's what it is, but they may not understand what it is. It's a category, okay? By 8 months, okay, they start to look at more of the expressive aspects, okay? And they can actually match it to a voice. So if you play like somebody who's really, really happy and you show them pictures of happy and sad, they're gonna look at the happy face, because now they've connected what that could be. So happy and what it sounds like and what it looks like. So it's, again, essential for social development, okay? One of the things that we talk about is eye gaze, okay? So kids with autism don't have that eye contact, so they cannot really connect with you on that level, okay? Because it's essential to form social bonds. And then they will look at your eyes, all right? But when the interacting person shifts their gaze from the infant's eyes, okay, the infant kind of withdraws. So engaging with an infant, they look at you, and then when you don't look at them anymore, it kind of disturbs them actually, and then they kind of regress. Okay. So sudden change in facial behavior has more negative impact than breaking eye contact. So the sudden change, again, it's because it's something that they don't understand. And this is called, it's an experiment, and we don't recommend that people do it, but it's called the still face situation. I'll show you a video just to show you what that would look like.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Okay, so that was very clear. So when he says the good, the bad, and the ugly, so the good is like how things should be. And then things could get bad where, for whatever reason, parent is unengaged, going through something of her own. And then the ugly is when that is repetitive. Okay, so you don't give a chance for this child to reconnect. Okay. And again, we see that with parents who have personality disorders, and you'll learn more about that in years to come. So when there's a personality disorder in a parent, or a chronic mental health problem, where they're not able to connect or kind of get that sort of where they rebond again, it becomes really frustrating for kids, because then they're kind of tense and anxious. So again, not something recommended for anyone to do. So we have early emotional development. So we have primary emotions, we have self-consciousness, and we have self-conscious emotions. So these are the primary emotions are present within the first 6 months of life. So joy is experienced by 3 months. So kids will smile because they're excited or happy. Sadness, because they obviously, like an infant, what's going to make them sad is if you take something from them. So they're playing with something, you take it away, so they're not going to be happy. Now, what about disgust? How can you assess that in an infant? How can you tell that an infant is disgusted with something? So it's really about the taste. You put something in they don't like, they spit it out. Okay. Anger, between 4 and 6 months. Okay, and it becomes more related to, again, frustration with not being able to do something that they want to do, and so that they anger, and it's, they cry. Fearfulness is around 6 to 8 months. Okay, so how do you develop fear? How do we become afraid? Okay, let's say like babies generally, first, second, third month of life, can they, does dark make a difference? Do they understand? So as we get older, we start to appreciate things. So you can start to appreciate darkness. But again, I think the input of your environment, and a lot of moms will use, if you don't do this, the whatever monster is going to come, like al-awa or whatever. If you don't do this, then something is going to come. If you don't play whatever or stop, I don't know who is going to come. So we can actually instill fear, because they have no clue what that is that you're saying, but it sounds like it's scary because you're threatening with it. So do you advise parents to use these kind of modalities of parenting? Okay, versus putting more like limits. If you don't do this, I'm taking that away from you. So I'm not instilling fear, but I'm instilling structure. Okay, so surprise obviously happens when there's a change, so as it means, so you're surprised by something. So these are called primary emotions. Self-consciousness, so that starts in the middle of the second year of life, and so this is the ability to experience emotional state of actually others. Okay, so starting to understand. So If mom is sort of sad looking or she's crying, what do babies usually do? A 2-year-old, if they see their mom crying, what are they going to do? They help her cry, or they will cry with her? Okay, they will cry with her. Some will try to like move her hands and see her face. Some will bring a tissue to like comfort her. Some will hug. So they can understand. Okay, they can understand that kind of a feeling. Then you have self-conscious emotions. And so these are more like higher function. So middle of the 3rd year. So things like empathy. What is empathy? It's like one of the most essential things in life. Yes, empathy is. So relating to others, what does that mean? What do you mean by relating? So that you understand what they feel. Okay, so that's kind of like understanding how a person feels, but empathy is a bit more than that. Yeah. So is putting yourself in that person's shoe. So what would you feel like if that happened to you? Okay, that's kind of the feeling. Okay, so when a little kid, 3-year-old, hits another child, and so mom says, you know, that wasn't really nice. How would you feel if he hit you? So those kind of things is developing empathy. Okay, you start to develop. So empathy is not something that you are just born with. Okay, you're not just born empathic. Your environment really affects how you become an empathic person. Would you agree or not? Have you met people who are just not empathic at all? Have you met people that are just, they don't really feel you? Like they do things and they don't really consider what it would be like for others. And have you ever encountered people like that? So when we do mock oral exams for like the psych residents, so one of the things that people are graded on, I think you do that in your pro, like communication skills, is empathy something that you guys are like scored if you're empathic? So what kind of things mean that, like, indicate empathy in when you're doing your pro? Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, it just means that you feel bad for them. Okay. Yeah. So those are things. Do you find that it just comes natural, or do you have to put effort into it? It should be genuine. So I think genuine is a really important part of empathy, because otherwise it sounds kind of fake, you know. So when we do mock oral exams for the psych residents, and of course psychiatry is like, if you're not empathic and you're a psychiatrist, then oh my God, you should do something else. Okay. But believe it or not, I mean, one of the things they score really low on is empathy, because I don't know, maybe they're so into the exam process, but again, you know, it's something that you need to train, because whether you're a psychiatrist or if you're a neurosurgeon, empathy is something that keeps your patients connected to you, because they'll say, oh, this doctor really feels what it's like to be me. Okay, and that is one of the basis of a good connection, and it keeps your patients coming back to you, because you're just a human. You're such a humanistic person. It is something that you have to just keep in mind to work on. So empathy, you can't have an empathic 2-year-old. So you can't have a 2-year-old, mom says, oh, you know, how would you feel? But it doesn't mean that we don't start, okay? But you really, by the middle of the 3rd year, closer to 4 is when they start to really understand. And again, kids at that time are where? Where are kids when they're like 3.5 or 4? So you're already going to nursery. So that part of their feeling system is essential in sort of managing interpersonal relationships, okay? Jealousy is another one. Okay, so jealousy is a normal feeling, but can we, as parents or environment, make it worse or better? So how can we make it worse? Yeah. Yeah. So if you always compare your child, you know, look at your brother, look at your cousin, look at whoever, it makes it a lot worse, and it kind of fosters into that feeling of being jealous. How could you encourage or empower your child without that comparison? What could you say? But if you want to motivate them, because usually parents will say, oh, look at your cousin, he's so smart, because they want you to be as smart or even better than. So they're kind of rewarding them, okay? So promoting, but do we always want to reward our kids for everything that they do? No, because you don't want it to be like tit for tat, like I'm gonna do this, you do this, and I do that. So it's a lot more about empowering them, like this, like if you were to do this, this would make you that kind of a person. So it's kind of promoting them as people more than comparing them to others. And sometimes also comparing a person to themselves is very powerful. So if your like mentor says, you know what, last year you were doing a lot better than you are this year, what's going on with you? The impact of that is way better than, you're not like, compared to your peers, you're just doing the worst. So, the idea is your mentor wants you to do better, but the way they say it is so different. So comparing you to you empowers you to do better for you, but comparing you to others just makes you feel frustrated, and it takes away from your even self-esteem, like you're worse than everybody else. It's not something anyone wants to hear. Okay, so embarrassment, okay, so it's exposure. It could be to negative evaluations of self. So if someone tells you, I just thought you'd be a lot smarter than this. Like, so if a mom tells her kid, why are you not as smart as whoever, or you should be smarter. So a negative evaluation of a person makes them feel really embarrassed. Sometimes kids, interestingly, if you give them positive, they get really embarrassed. So I've seen kids when you say, oh my God, you're such an amazing, you're so smart, you start to hide behind their moms. And some mom says like she's like, he could actually be aggressive because he doesn't want her to, because he's so self-conscious, whether it's positive or negative. So moms have to be very intuitive to their children, and moms are like, they know, your mom would know between you and your sister, if I say this to her, the impact is different. I could say the same thing to both, and impact is different for each. So moms are usually very sensitive and intuitive to that. All right, so self-conscious evaluative emotion. So this sounds a lot harder than it really is, okay? So a child needs to be able to evaluate themselves against a set of standards. So how do you know if something is right or wrong? Like, how do you know if something's right or wrong? As a kid growing up, are we born knowing that we shouldn't lie, we shouldn't steal? So how do we learn that? Yeah, and what in your environment? Your parents. So your parents are the ones that will give you the set of standards based on, again, a culture. So some things in some cultures are okay, and some things in some cultures are not okay. And within the same culture and within different houses, but again, there's basic stuff, like there's basic morals across everywhere. You don't lie, you don't steal, you don't hurt people. So that's very basic. But if you're a child that's born on the street, like you're an orphan and you're raised by the street, where do you get your standards from? Yeah, so are there any standards? It's survival. So the street is all about survival. So yes, I'm gonna steal. Yes, I'm gonna lie. Yes, I'm gonna do everything because I have to survive. So can you see the difference? How your environment completely affects the set of morals that you have. And then when you see people on the street and they steal and you're like, oh my God, how could they do that? Well, they never had anyone tell them that they shouldn't or couldn't, okay? The only way that they know that it's wrong is when they're caught, right? And they're put into jail or whatever. I mean, that becomes the only signal of, this is right or this is wrong, okay? So first you need to have a set of standards, all right? Then you need to be able to decide, okay, if what you did is related, like if an event is related to your action, okay? So something happened, was it because of me or was it not because of me? So this is, again, a thought process, all right? Boys and girls, interestingly, could be a little bit different. Girls tend to internalize, boys tend to externalize. So girls tend to self-blame, no, it must have been my fault. Boys tend to say, it wasn't me, okay? Not me, nothing to do with me. Again, it could be a stereotype, but I mean, you can have girls who also tend to externalize, but they've just found that girls are more internalizers. Okay. So shame and guilt is another type of higher or complex feeling. So when a child judges their sort of behavior as a failure, okay, and then they make a global attribution. So they failed at something, so then they say, again, your parental input is really essential. So you drop something as a kid. So you can have a mom that says, you know what, just be careful next time, versus a mom says, oh my God, why are you so clumsy? So which one do you think has a negative impact? Yeah, so when you say, why are you so clumsy? Or, oh my God, you're so clumsy. So then you start to attribute that this is not an accident. This is something because I am a clumsy person, okay? The power of words, okay? And it really hits hard with kids because they receive it and then they start to like, try to understand it. And then it becomes an attribute. So maybe I am clumsy. Maybe I am stupid. Maybe I am ugly because my mom says that I am, okay? So it must be true, right? So again, kids with self-esteem issues, it starts off with these negative comments that become like these attributes, and then they start to believe them, and then they start to act based upon the fact that I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm clumsy, I'm whatever, okay? And again, guilt comes from a sense of failure. So you failed someone, you failed yourself, and then you start to feel guilty. Pride. So this is a positive emotion, right? So when you've done something that is great and you feel like you're empowered, then you get that pride, and it's usually based on a behavior. Okay, we're going to move on to social development. Okay, we know that we are social beings, right? But have you met people who don't like people? Have you met like people like they don't like people, they're very happy to be on their own, they're very self-sufficient, don't really have many friends, and they're pretty okay with it, not bothered, okay? That is not the norm, that's not the usual. The usual is that we like to have people in our life because we're social beings, okay? By 3 months, we already have an understanding of a connection between what something sounds like and what it is, okay? And we have information about faces. So this is just a bit of a revision, okay? Now, mothers, again, when we talk about mothers, we talk about attachment, but again, it doesn't have to be a mother, whoever, the primary caretaker, okay? So the attachment theory, and this is really important. So as we go along in this course, you'll have names of people who talked about theories. I only inserted, very simple and minimal things. If you're going to go on to do psychiatry, there's just so much more. But we learn about these theorists because it affects our treatment of people. So when I encounter a patient who has problems in their interpersonal skills, they can't maintain friends, they can't sustain them, then I start to wonder about attachment. What was this person's attachment like? Obviously, at the age of 20 some years you're not going to really remember the first 2 years of your life and what was it like being fed by your mom, and was she attentive? You're not going to remember that. Would you agree? Okay. But you're going to have a collective feeling of childhood. So some of you would say, oh, I had a great childhood. Or some of you would say, I had a lousy childhood. But you wouldn't remember the details, but you just have a general feeling. So events that happen to you in your life go into this pool, and then they give you that sense of it was great, could have been better. Oh, I definitely want to do something different with my own children. Okay, so all of us have that sense, okay? So Bowlby talks about attachment. So he's kind of the father of attachment theory, okay? So he says that this affectional tie between mom and baby is really crucial for healthy development, okay? He says when there's a warm, intimate, and continuous, so I want to underline continuous because it has to be continuous, because if it's interrupted, then you're like attached, detached, attached, detached, right? So it's not a healthy attachment. It has to be continuous with the mother, in which both, underline both, find satisfaction and enjoyment. It cannot be one way. So it cannot be that this infant is doting on his mom and the mom is just not interested, not really interactive. Okay, so then it's not two-sided, it's just one-sided. And what happens when you have a one-sided relationship? What happens? You like a friend and she doesn't like you back. How do you feel? It really, it's a very negative, it's a negative feeling because you feel like you're not important, non-significant, because if you were, that person would love you. Okay, so my mom would love me if I was significant. The fact that she doesn't because it's not reciprocal, it means there's something wrong with me. Okay, so kids are not going to say, oh, my mom has a mental health issue and so therefore I totally understand why now I'm at the age of 3 she doesn't really care. So they don't have that. So everything is about them because that's what it is being a child. The world revolves around you. So if the world is not revolving around me, that means there's something wrong with me, correct? How does that affect my self-esteem? Terrible. So you're going to grow up with like nasty self-esteem because the most essential person in your life didn't really give you time of day. Not because, again, you as a child would not understand, but it's really because of their own issues. You're going to kind of attribute it to you, okay? So we talk about bonding and attachment. So you will find that some of these theorists will talk about names of phases and ages when that happens. This is something you have to know. So this will be exam material, okay? So he talks about the pre-attachment stage from birth to 12 weeks, so birth to around 3 months. So this is when babies are orienting to their mom, okay? So we said like visual acuity starts to improve. They start to understand her facial features. They kind of follow her and with her voice, okay? So they're kind of not yet attached. They're kind of still pre-attaching. They're still getting used to her, okay? Then you have attachment in the making. So 8 or 12 weeks roundabout, so 2 months, 3 months to around 6 months, okay? They start to then become attached to other people in their environment. So dad, siblings, okay? So they're like starting attachment with mom. They're also starting attachment with others. From 6 to 24 months, he calls it clear-cut attachment. And so here infants cry when separated from caretaker or mom. Why do you think that happens? From 6 months to 2 years. What do most moms do when they realize that their kids cry when they're leaving? What do these moms do? Like, no, like you want to go out, but you know that every time you want to leave, this baby cries, your child cries. Yeah, so what these moms do is kid is sleeping or they make their siblings distract them, okay? And then she just kind of sneaks away and comes back, okay? Now, you will understand more when we discuss cognitive development of children. Up until the age of 2, kids don't have a sense of things being constant. So when she's gone, they think she's disappeared. She's never coming back. So the sense that she is not going to disappear starts to develop after the age of 2. And that's why kids will cry when moms are leaving, okay? Again, it depends on the type of attachment. If kids are not securely attached to their moms, because moms are really unpredictable, then kids will cry even after the age of 2. Okay, so it depends on how secure or not children are attached to their parents. Then from the 4th phase, he calls it 25 months and above, so after the age of 2. So the mother is more independent. So now children know that moms will go and come back. Okay, so they feel securely attached. Now they start to develop more complex relationships outside. Okay, so this is, again, around the time when kids can start to head off to nursery, so after the age of 2. So they start to connect to other kids in daycare, teachers. But can you understand or appreciate that if you have not developed that strong bond with your mom, it becomes really difficult to start forming bonds with others, because that is also a prototype of an interpersonal relationship. So if it's a secure like type of a relationship, it makes you somebody who's more able to form relationships in life. Does that make sense? So yes.
They might let less information when the mother
They,
if they're attached to other people besides their
so I'll give you an example. I've had one mom tell me her child is very attached to the nanny. Okay, and that was something that was really bothering her because, like, you know, I feel like I'm not important as a mother. I feel my child is more attached to the nanny than she is to me. Okay. But in fact, the attachment with the mother, like the first, let's say, 18 months of life, is something that nothing can ever replace. So it's actually healthy for your child to develop attachments with others. So I was telling her, if your child was not developing an attachment to the nanny, then that would not be normal. Okay. The normal thing is they've attached to you. So therefore, that was a good experience. Then they can start to attach to others, okay, expecting also a good experience. You know what I mean? So it is expected for kids, and because we are social beings, if you have a child that's just stuck to their mother, that is not normal, you know? So these children are going to have separation anxiety big time because they cannot separate from their moms. So you don't want to foster that. You want to foster a healthy, secure attachment. And then you want your child to be able to form different types of attachment, okay? Because it just means that your attachment with your child was actually a healthy and normal one. And children should separate without being anxious, again, because moms are predictable, moms will come back, okay? So kids who have separation anxiety, for example, is really hard for them to go to school. They want to stay home, they don't want to leave moms, okay? And then you look at the attachment when you work with kids who have separation anxiety. You're going to ask something? Okay. Again, it depends on it's a lot more complex because you mean like if the nanny leaves? It happens, you know, kids will cry and they will get over it because that was not their primary caretaker. There is a mother, okay? There is a mother, there is a father. Obviously, sometimes we have an imbalance in terms of the level of connectedness. So if this child connects to the nanny as if she is the primary, she is the only one, again, parents pick up on that and they usually come for assessment because they have a concern. You know, like this child is way too attached to the nanny. So then we look at that and like, yeah, okay, so they are way too attached to them. Why is that? Where are you? How can you as a mother be more involved in the life of your child? So as you said, when this person who is only temporary eventually leaves, that your child doesn't fall apart, okay? So parents have to be insightful to actually come to that conclusion. And we do see parents coming in to get advice on how to do things differently.
Other people being involved in the care. For example, an older sibling, let's say 15 years old, to take care also or only the mother.
Life, okay, as it is, it's not possible for a mom to be there 24/7. It's just not possible. So usually what happens is siblings come in, grandparents come in. So the life of a child has so many other people, but the prototype becomes the first person they interacted with. And again, what makes it that close is because of the feeding, okay? But again, like we said, some moms don't breastfeed, and so it's the dad could give the bottle, the whoever could give. But again, the first few months, usually moms keep the baby with them because the baby's sleep is still not on, you know, so the attachment occurs. And then obviously others have to kind of pitch in, or else like mom, there's no mom that can run the show completely unsupported, okay? And it's actually nice when siblings come in because it removes from the sense that, you know, that is a special baby, like the whole jealousy thing. It helps when others come in and they all feel like involved and significant. So yeah, for sure, we want everybody to help. So another person called Mary Ainsworth, she talks about attachment in the first tier of life, okay? And she sort of defines different types of attachment, okay? So she talks about ambivalent, she talks about secure, avoidant, and disorganized. Do you know what ambivalent means? What is ambivalent? Yeah. So confusing. So if you have ambivalent feelings about something, that means, are you confused? So it's usually mixed feelings. So they're a mixture of positive and negative, okay? So kids, in terms of attachment, can have an ambivalent attachment with a parent, so it's mixed, okay? They can have a secure, which is definitely the target. We want all kids to have a secure attachment. They could have an avoidant attachment. What is avoidant? What is avoidant? Yeah, so you don't want to have an attachment, okay? And then you can have a disorganized. So in my practice, I've been in practice for like 20 some years. I've never seen disorganized. Okay, so disorganized is something you probably would see in orphanages where kids have multiple caretakers and there's never a chance for any kind of connection. So they're completely, it's like they're living out in the jungle. They just are completely disorganized. So they're very rare and I've never actually come across. So we see more of the ambivalent, secure, and the avoidant. So I'll show you.
This experiment, which I watched through a two-way mirror, is designed to gauge how secure is the crucial relationship between mother and child.
Okay, this bunny is going to go here, and that bunny will be on top.
The value of the test has been established in studies that would watch a child, 1-year-old, and then follow it up and interview them about their relationships to their parents when they were 21 years old. So we're quite confident in the long-term significance of this relationship.
Peter, that's Peter.
After several minutes' play, the mother is signaled to leave the room.
Sweetie, I'll be back in 1 minute, okay? I'll get you back in 1 minute.
Is it upsetting for you? Shame, I feel. But she'll survive. The key moment in the experiment is the child's reaction to her mother's return.
Hi. Hi, honey. It's okay.
The important clue is whether the baby's able to become calmed down by the contact with the mother, get back to play. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes. But you see, when the mother was out, she was only interested in the mother, no interest in the toys. Now she has a contact with the mother. She's beginning to show a little interest in the environment, and shortly she'll be right back with the toys where we started.
So you would call this a secure one?
Yes, yes.
She's certainly much happier.
Goes to the door following her. Now, we sent the mother right back in, but the point here is not to distress the baby. We're just trying to challenge it. The baby puts her hands to her face in a sad expression, puts her face down. When she picks her up, she keeps her head down, her arms out, and then she sits in the chair holding the baby. The baby's still sullen. He's low-keyed.
So you would call this insecure attachment?
Yes, insecure. He's avoidant. He's not engaging her, and it's not the reunion's not effective. And it's important to remember here that the thing that upset him was her absence. Her return should be the solution to his problem. Now this is another pattern that we see in babies who are not good at using their mother as a secure base at home. This baby is also insecure. But you'll see, we get a look at his play before the separation. The mother's left, and when she returns, she picks him up. He can't calm down. He's still upset. She offers a toy to amuse him or to comfort him or to distract him, and he slaps it away. She offers another. He slaps it away. He's angry. We call these babies resistant or ambivalent because they both want her back and yet can't use the contact. We think that the difficulty is that in the past, when he sought comfort, she's been inconsistent as to whether she's available and responsive or not.
Okay, so that was clear. Okay, so kids who are securely attached are going to calm down when their moms come in. Those that are ambivalent, you saw like the child was kind of pushing because he wants her but doesn't want her. And those that are insecure are just more avoidant. Okay. Now, there are treatment centers that work with moms from kids up to the age of 5 on attachment. So I was attending this conference in New York, and they were talking about a center in New York that just purely works on attachment, which is like fascinating because it's kind of like a day program. So parents come in for individual parent sessions and then parent-child sessions like that every day of the week. So 5 days of the week with different types of sort of intervention. Where again, some moms really need guidance in terms of how to connect. And the reason there was an attachment problem was something related to moms, like, when he said about the ambivalent is because she's not been consistent. So ambivalence usually comes from like non-consistent parenting. Remember when we talked about the definition of bonding or attachment, it has to be continuous and both have to be engaged, okay? So if it's not continuous, it's going to cause attachment issues. So can you fix attachment problems? So you can fix them when you pick them up early. And usually these kids are referred because of issues in daycare. So, they're noticed in daycare to be either aggressive with other children or kind of like very isolated. So that will be the trigger of a referral. And there's something wrong with this child in the way that they connect, okay? And so mom takes the child to, a specialist, and then that's how it starts, And so there are special assessments for attachment for toddlers. And so when we work with moms, you like there's like a whole let's say checklist or attachment questionnaires. And then you start to like develop a treatment plan where you want to have, moms more engaged. Remember I told you that the mom of the triplets, so that was one of the things, she had major issues with attachment. And as much as these kids wanted to, the issue was her. Like she had a problem with the whole attachment. Okay, so what about fathers? Okay. So can fathers do what mothers do? Certain limit. Is there a limit? Huh? Birth and breastfeeding, put that aside. But so someone says affection. Are you guys affectionate? Can you be affectionate with your babies? So is there really a difference? Okay. What do dads do that's different that moms can't do? So there's actually something they can do that we can't. So what do dads do that moms can't do, or they do it differently? Like, think about your own dads. Treatment. Guys, your dad, like dads. Yes? Okay, so you're talking about negative things that you guys do. And give me positive. Sorry?
Look up to their fathers.
They look up to moms too. But I mean, generally, we all, like as mothers, we want the dad, the image of the dad is something that's significant, because every person needs to have somebody, but there has to be someone who they cannot go beyond. So in Arabic, we say like, كل واحد يحتاج له كبير. لازم كبير. I don't know in English. So somebody that is like the utmost respect. So usually kids would do things, they're like, okay, but don't tell dad. Okay, so dad has this like a sense of their strength. Okay, what does your dad do? Like your dad in your life is the sense of what? So your dad is your sense of security. We're almost done. So your dad is like your.
I just wanted to say, I'll be leaving for lunch. Is there anything else I should have?
No, like the attendance is not with you, right?
So the attendance is with you all. Did you finish signing? Where is it? Okay.
And then the online is with Mr. Muntasir, right?
Yes, so I want to send this to Mr. Professor. Whenever you're done with the session, I'll send it here.
How, if you're gone, how would you know that I'm done? Because I don't know if they're going to be.
Because I have this one.
Okay, so your dad is like your backbone. It's your, thank you, and your sense of security. And what is your mom? What is your mom to you? So moms is like your sense of like love, like it's the softness in your life. Your dad is your backbone, your security, right? But also like, you know, like rough play, outdoor stuff, like dads tend to do more of that than moms. Like, you know, teaching your kid how to ride a bike. Again, I'm not being stereotypic, but I'm just saying this is how it's generally been. So dads tend to do more of that active stuff. So you'll find that their interaction is not so much with like little tiny infants, but more like when they're 2 years old and they're like wanting to explore the world. So that's where dads take their hand and, you know, go on that exploration. So that's where it could be a bit different. Okay. What about the indirect effects of dads? What is your indirect effect? So it would be, again, that sense of security, as well as a lot of times moms will say, you know, ya waylak min baba. So you better do this or I'm telling your dad. Okay. So dads have that sense of, again, he's not like the monster. And again, we tell moms, please don't make dads the monster. Don't scare your kids by dad who's like, you know, so kids feel like afraid of dad when dad is really not going to do anything hurtful, right? But there has to be that sense where kids have that hierarchy of respect. So if something reaches dad, oh my God, that must have been like they must have done something absolutely disastrous. Okay. So you would agree that that's a general sense. We're all raised that way. Okay. So are children attached to their fathers? Yes, of course, they're attached to their, again, level of attachment is really depending on input. So if the dad is not involved in the care of children and is just there to kind of say the do's and the don'ts, would you be attached to your dad versus if you had a dad who's like in your day-to-day life? I mean, some people say I'm closer to my dad because he's a lot more logical. I'm closer to my mom. She's just a lot more emotional. So it's really varied. So your own experience, actually, interestingly, you know, your experience of your parents may be so different from that of your siblings. So each one of you has a different experience of the same people. And we're going to learn about that, you know, in other lectures, because how is that possible? They're just the same parents. How come I see them as amazing and you see them as not? Okay, so that difference in the experience. So other people, siblings, grandparents, uncles, aunts, peers, teachers, we look at types of relationships, how to develop relationships, okay? So again, in relationships with kids, you know, you'll have children that come and say that I don't have friends, or you worry that your child is somebody that's just always being taken advantage of within a friendship sort of circle. So we teach our kids, you know, relationships have to be reciprocal. So you cannot always be the one that gives and then they always take. So these are the things that we learn from a young age, because I've seen, you know, people in their 20s complain of the same thing. You know, they're not able to sustain relationships because in relationships they feel they're always taken advantage of. They never get in as much as they put in. Okay, so these are common complaints that people, you know, in their 20s would start to like kind of have more insight about, because it becomes a part of their life. So again, we teach kids from a young age, if it's not working for you, then just abandon ship. This is not a relationship you want to embark on, because you're not getting in what you are putting in. Okay, so this is kind of like a timeline of, you know, how it starts with mothers and then self and then other relationships. Okay, I'm going to end here because it's going to take time for me to explain when I cut. So we're going to continue next time. Okay, because again, Winnicott is one of these people that I personally, you know, apply the theories of when I'm doing therapy, because it's very appealing when you understand it. So we'll do Winnicott, inshallah, next week and continue. Are there any questions? Everybody's okay? I'm going to try and upload everything today for you on Moodle so that it's available with the PDFs and all, okay?